I'm here in Florence, Alabama with Mr. Vic Batson, who was my longtime next door neighbor in Nashville
Right.
from 1964 till, what, 2007?
Yeah, 2007.
2007. And
Yeah.
Mr. and Mrs. Batson moved down here to Florence, Alabama to be closer with their daughter and the grandkids and rest of the family. And anyway, several years ago, Mr. Batson was telling me some stories I thought were quite fascinating, and I wanted to try to get them on video to share with people. And so here we'll go.
Okay, here we go. Well,
Mr. Batson was a Grand Ole Opry announcer back.
Well, I was an announcer at WSM in Nashville. Came to work there shortly after WSM opened up the first television station down in this part of the country. And with the advent of television, since the announcing staff, and I was on the announcing staff, since the announcing staff covered both the radio station downtown and the TV station in the outskirts of town, they were running a little short on personnel, and I had a friend who was already working there, and he got me a chance to come up and interview and talk with the people, and they finally decided to hire me. And I came to Nashville in 1951. In fact, I arrived on the tail end of a great blizzard that they'd had in Nashville that winter, very bad. But anyway.
You rode the train up, didn't you?
I rode the train up from Birmingham. Got a car ride up to Birmingham and caught the train in Birmingham and arrived in Nashville much later than I was supposed to, and then I stepped off of the train into snow up to about my knee and decided I had made a big mistake, and I was ready to head back down to Tuscaloosa where it was warmer. Anyway, I didn't. Had a lot of fun, a lot of interesting experiences while I was with WSM. The good friend who helped me go from Tuscaloosa to Birmingham to work with WBRC in Birmingham for a while had already gone on to Nashville to WSM, so he helped me come up and get on with WSM. He had an idea. He was always very creative and thinking of hot ideas and everything, and he had an idea that he thought would prove to be very popular locally. Television was so new that everybody was fascinated. The joke was that people would sit and watch the test pattern just because they could, and not very interesting. But so he got around and talked with various people, and one of the people he talked to was the man who was the manager of the Noble Hotel in Nashville, who had a very large banquet room where they had large banquets for people of various occasions. And what they came up, he and the guy came up with this idea. We would do a television show from the ballroom, and he would sell people lunch to come sit and eat in the ballroom while the television show was being produced and everything. And he thought that was a pretty good deal. The owner of the hotel thought that was a good deal. So we started, my friend started luncheon at the Knoll. I thought we had, yeah. Here's one of the flyers that we mailed out promoting the luncheon at the Knoll. This was another one that we did the same thing. And we had several cameras. My friend was the MC. He always had a bunch of crazy stunts that he would get people involved in.
Now, who was your friend?
Dave Overton.
Dave Overton. I remember that name.
And but the big appeal and the thing that made it successful, and it was successful because we had crowds every day, filled the ballroom with a couple of hundred people, and we had one camera and one cameraman stationed with a long lens for close-ups, so that from a distance he could get a close-up of somebody from about here up to the top of their head. And that's all he did, was just during the whole show, he just kept moving from one person to another, one person to another for that close-up. And whoever that person was, the idea was, and it worked, was they would go home after the show and their neighbors would come running in and saying, "Oh, I saw you on television today at Luncheon at the Knoll." And so people loved that, and we had no trouble getting a crowd. I think the other thing, Jimmy, that we talked about was I did work at the Grand Ole Opry for a while. That was a unique situation down there and a unique production. Everybody, the story was, and it was a fact. It was not a made-up story. The production of that show, because this was radio, this was not television so much, although they were doing it on television then. But everybody sort of wandered around, and then they'd all come together in time to do a show for some particular sponsor. And I had become the voice of a particular account who had bought advertising on the radio station and the TV, and I got the chance to do their commercials, and they liked it, so I became their voice. It was Hester Battery Company, and their logo was "Start and Go with Hester." And they finally got a chance to buy a show on the Opry. Now, the way the Opry worked, when you came in as a sponsor, unless you were willing to spend big bucks to get way up front, you started with the last show on the night, the last show of the night. Then every time a sponsor ahead dropped out, all the ones behind moved up a show. And you moved up to the next show slot. Whoever the star was in that slot, you just got them. You didn't buy them or request them. You just took it as it was. Whoever they had assigned out of the country music stars to do this 10:30 show, that was your star. And I was fortunate enough, because I walked in, they said, you know, Hester's got the 10:30 show, and you're the man, you know, get out there and do it. And I walked in, and that's the only thing they told me. They didn't tell me where anything was, where my copy was, who was going to be on the show, or anything else. And so I wandered around and finally found out Cowboy Copas. Now, I don't know how many people, unless you're a real aficionado of country music stars and the Grand Ole Opry, you probably would not know Cowboy Copas.
Right, he was killed when Patsy Cline was killed.
That's right. That's right. He was killed in that same thing.
Randy
accident.
Hughes, and there was another.
Yeah, several. I don't remember all of them either. But
I should know. I've been to that side.
Copas was a really nice guy, and he walked over and introduced himself to me, and he said, "Are you going to do the commercials?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And I said, "What do I do?" And he said, "Don't worry about it. You just, when the time comes, you get up and say, 'Now here's the star of our show, Cowboy Copas.'" And he said, "I'll take it from there, and I'll hand it to you when you need to do a commercial." And that's the way you did, you know. And that worked real well. Everybody showed up most of the time when they were supposed to. There were occasions, sometimes, when somebody goofed up and didn't make it when they should. I had moved up several slots by this time, and Carl Smith, is that right? Carl Smith was the star of that particular show. And as usual, I went out. I didn't look to see whether he was there or not. That was his responsibility. And so when the music started and everything, and it came time for me to open the show, I walked up and did the opening bit, and as per always, turned and said, "And here's the star of our show, Carl Smith." And there was no Carl Smith. And I panicked. Fortunately, there was a quartet, four guys that sang as a quartet that were on that show. They had been there long enough and were savvy enough that when Carl didn't show up, they immediately walked up to the microphone and started doing one of their songs. And while they were doing that, I tore out to the back and down to the dressing rooms and found the one where Carl Smith was and reminded him, I'm surprised I didn't get thrown off of the show from the way I talked to him. I wasn't very nice, but I was a little upset by what had happened, but I did make a point to him that the show has already started and you've already been introduced, so get out there.